Hello everybody, this is Danny from Deep South Homestead on Porch Time today. Got a particular subject. I keep getting asked a lot of questions about this one. This has been something that's been asked to me almost since we started our YouTube channel, and I have purposely avoided the basic question. I've tried to hit around and beat around the bush about how to answer it, and mainly because for some reason I don't get it, but for some reason it ticks a lot of people off, and I don't understand why. But I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna try to address this subject today on Porch Time. And you know, and y'all just the information I'm giving y'all is not from me. I've been doing research. This is what the federal government says, and the agricultural department says is the answers to this one question. And that question is, what does it cost to grow your own food, and how much land does it take? Now, me personally, I personally don't believe there's an exact answer to that question. And I'll tell you why. I think people's diets are diverse. I think people's land is different. I know here my soil is about 80% sand, and I have to constantly put some kind of nutrition into it because it leaches out all the time. I have a friend who lives not far from me here. His land is so rich because it's all bottom land that he doesn't hardly have to add anything. I mean, so your land will determine a lot of this factor. But now, just for argument's sake and playing the devil's advocate, I went and started doing research from programs that's been put out by different universities. So this is not going to be a 100%. Now, I'll throw my thoughts in it, but this is not going to be a 100% Danny's theology. So you have no reason to get upset with me because I'm giving you university studied facts that they have put out there. Now, let's go back to the thought of it depends on the diet. Because personally, I believe that is going to be the deciding factor in how much it costs to raise your food and how much land it takes to raise it on, is your personal diet. Because you see, we all have different diets. It doesn't matter where you live at in this country, everywhere in the country has a different diet. Now, what I did was I took the average American diet across the board, just the average diet according to these different universities, and this is the information that they come up with. Now, this is not just one university, this is several different studies. They come up with the fact that the average human being eats 2,000 pounds of food per year. Now, that's average. Some eat more, some eat less, depending on your diet. Now, out of these studies, the biggest factor in all these studies was meat. Meat was the largest variable in all the studies that I looked at. Depending on how much meat you ate, depended on how much it cost, how much land it would take. Because meat was by far the most expensive part of this whole study. The average American diet
eats about 190 grams of meat per day. And in order to keep that up, these different studies I looked at, depending on the year that the study was done. Now, if you go back, let's go with some of the pre-depression era, it took 2 acres per person in the family. Modern day times, now, for the average American diet, it says, all these university studies states it takes 1 acre per person in the family based on an average American diet. Now, I've always said that because of just here at Deep South Homestead, what it takes Wanda and I. Wanda and I farm about 3 acres. And 3 acres provides enough food for Wanda and I to live for a year. And have a little extra left over at the end of the year in case there's a problem for the next year. Now, that is the only reason I have ever said that, is because of my own personal experience here. I know there's a lot of studies out there that I looked at that on square foot gardening that showed that you could raise this amount of food and you could, you would be able to put enough food in your pantry to make it for a year. But now I'm going to show you, because that really intrigued me. But now I'm going to show you what I found in some of the studies that kind of debunked that a little bit. One was the body must take in certain vitamins, certain minerals, certain fibers in order for it to remain healthy, and certain fats in order for it to remain healthy. Now, as I looked at these different studies, I came to the realization where they were going with their studies, and I really get it, because it's basically what we've realized here. Here at Deep South Homestead, we are not able at this point, because I don't have enough land cleared and fenced, to be able to raise 100% of our meat here. Because of my physical condition and my diet, I have to have a high protein source every couple of hours. Now, I can get, everybody goes, well, you could do beans and you could do, you could do different nuts and stuff like that. Well, going back to my physical condition, I can't do beans that cause a lot of gas in my system, because that gas causes me to have a heart arrhythmia. I can eat some kinds of beans and some kinds of peas, but I can't eat just any kind. So that makes mine even more complicated. The average person has got to have certain fats in their diet, and you've got to have certain oils just to cook with. So here we go with the fact that meat is where a lot of those fats and oils come from. Now, granted, a lot of it, like the bread flour that we use here, comes from almonds. Because of my physical issue, I have to have almond flour. I can't even use rice flour. I have to have almond flour. So that even makes someone like, say, in my condition, even worse, because I can't raise almond trees here. So, in order to, but almonds has a great fats, it has the right fats, it has all these things in it. But see, I'm just using me as an example because that's the only thing I know about. I don't know about your condition. Yours could be worse, or you could be a lot better. But we look at oils and fats that the body needs in order to be healthy. Because see, the brain, according to these studies, the brain needs a certain amount of cholesterol, the brain needs a certain amount of fat, the brain needs a certain amount of sugar to work and function properly. Now, a lot of these oils, fats, and sugars come from nuts, meat, and fruits. Now,
let's stop and think about how much land does it take to do all this. Well, if you raise a cow, where I live at, a cow here, I used to raise a whole herd of cattle here. I had 27 cows that I raised on my place here, plus a bull. And it took me, I had, at that one point when I had that many, I had 30-something acres of land, and I'm telling you, I barely had enough room to rotational graze that many animals in my climate. So, right off the bat, we see that if you're going to keep meat and beef, then it takes an acre per animal here. Now, some places in the country it takes more acres. Out west, it takes more acreage because of the dry climate. There's places where it's really luscious in this country that you can do it on less land. So you see, beef is going to take you 1 acre per animal to raise beef, and do it efficiently because, let's back up, according to these studies now, you've got to have the grass, you've got to have the grain, you've got to have all these things to feed these animals unless you want strictly grass-fed. And if you want strictly grass-fed beef, then it takes a whole lot longer to get that animal to the butchering stage than it does if you give him a little grain along to beef the fat up in him. So that all those things play into the factor. Now, some people go, well, I eat rabbit meat for protein. Well, rabbit meat's a great source. We eat it here at Deep South Homestead. 2 rabbits produce about 90 pounds of meat a year. Extremely high in protein, but has, now our rabbits, a lot of people say rabbits don't have any fat on them, but when we butcher our rabbits are rolling in fat. So that's not necessarily true. Now, I think these studies, when you see them, are talking about wild rabbits, because our tame rabbits have a 1/4 inch of fat almost all over their bodies when we butcher them. So there is some fat in rabbits. Don't let that throw you. I think they're talking about wild rabbits there. But now, 2 rabbits produces 90 pounds of rabbit meat per year. That's a good bit of meat on a homestead. Takes up very little space. That's the reason I'm telling you, there's a lot of variables in this equation. Now, a lot of people forage, even we do it here. A lot of people, they hunt. They go out into the wild and bring in part of their meat. Here at Deep South Homestead, we like to take about 2 deer a year. We would like 3, but 2 is what we shoot for. This past year, we only got 1. And because of that, we have to buy some meat to have ground meat. Now, we do raise pigs here on Deep South Homestead. My pigs cost me very, very little to eat. I have my pigs in a 1 acre pen, and that 1 acre pen pretty much keeps them sustainable because they mainly eat grass. Mine don't root bad. They are grass eaters. They get the scraps from the homestead here. When we go into the garden and we clean things out, the pigs get the scraps. Chickens, we have chickens. The chickens get the scraps. Also, the chickens get the weeds out of the garden. So all these animals are being sustained off the homestead here, which cuts back on the financial side of it as far as cost, which means that it makes it a little bit more sustainable for us here at our homestead. But now, according to the universities, they are not factoring in these things. They're factoring in having to buy everything. And that's why I wanted to do this today, because I wanted to show y'all that you can offset some of these costs by raising your own food. Because the government doesn't look at people who raise their own food when they do these surveys and studies and stuff like that. They are basically figuring you're going to a store somewhere and you're going to buy this food. So as homesteaders, I'm hoping that we can bring this equation down some. The only thing about these equations of 1 acre per person, per family, is the fact that it's very, very difficult to figure everything in, because when you stop and think about the fruits that you have to have, a fruit tree, the average fruit tree needs X number of square feet in order to produce. A chicken needs X number of square feet in order to have a place to live. I mean, sheep need X number of acres in order to be able to produce abundantly. So there's all these factors that has to be played into this. That's the reason I said at the beginning, I don't think there's any 100% answer to this question. All I can tell you is what the federal government has come up with as far as figuring, our agriculture department, figuring how much land it costs per person in this country. And they have deemed it down to 1 acre per person is how they have it figured. And I can say honestly here at Deep South Homestead, in order to get all the fiber, the nutrition, the minerals, the sugars and all this kind of stuff, the oils and all this kind of stuff, we have found that it takes 1 acre or more here at Deep South Homestead. Now, what if SHTF happens? How long would you survive if this happened? Could you, on your homestead, now this is the reason I'm doing this, could you on your homestead provide the vitamins, the minerals, the fats, and the sugars that your body needs, and the fibers and all that your body needs to survive indefinitely on your homestead? I mean, let's just be honest. Could we do it? How much land would it take to do it? And what would it cost? Well, first thing is it would cost an awful lot of time, because none of this is going to come very easy. And that's the reason we tell you from experience here at our homestead is the simple fact that it doesn't come easy. The people who come here and they help us realize why we have to start at 5 o'clock in the morning going is because it's a full day a lot of times. Now, we have to stop because of our age and the heat of the day. But used to, when we were younger, we didn't stop during the heat of the day. We just kept working all day long. But now that we're older, it takes its toll on our body, so we get less done now. So your time is going to be your biggest factor. If SHTF happens, then you're going to have the time, because you're not going to be doing anything else. You're not going to work. Work will cease to exist. You will literally be on your own during this time. Now, there are other factors that we have to look at in this. Is if let's just say if SHTF happens, how will, let's say you have some land. How will you till enough of that land to be able to raise your own food? That's something to think about. That's why Wanda and I have invested in the Hoss tools, is because we're going to have some way to break this dirt up in order to do it. We're not going to be able to get out there physically at our age with a shovel and break all this land up that we need, and I'm not even sure we're going to be able to do it with a Hoss tool. I don't know if we have the energy. But it's man-powered. It doesn't require any machinery powered. So looking at 1 acre per person, that's 2 of us. I don't think we would have to, I'm just going to say this. I don't think we would have to farm 2 acres. This studies that I've done shows that it takes 2 acres to provide, 1 acre per person to provide all the things that the body needs. You've got to factor in, all of that's not farmland. You've got to have some for fruit trees, some for nut trees, some for grazing. Now, granted, animals can graze under fruit trees and graze under nut trees during off-season times, and land can be utilized more efficiently. People can do permaculture. You can bring a lot of your stuff in a smaller area to do it down like that. You can raise a lot of your vegetables and stuff like that in amongst other things with permaculture. That's why modern homesteading, I think, has shrunk it down from the 2 acres like it used to be pre-depression area down to 1 acre now. And possibly, I'm actually going to step out on a limb and say I believe that you could do it with a little bit less than 1 acre per person if you did the permaculture in the right way. Now that's stepping out on a limb. That's going against all the studies that I've shown. But from experience here at Deep South Homestead, I believe that if you had rich enough soil, it's possible to do it. Now, could we do it here at Deep South? No. Our soil's too sandy. We couldn't do it. Another thing you have to factor into this equation is if you did have a way to break your land up, what would you use to fertilize it with? Because you go, oh, well, we just put the seeds in the ground. I mean, we got rich dirt. Well, plants pull stuff from the soil constantly, and that's what's wrong with 90% of our food system today is the soil's depleted and there's no nutritional value in most of our food, especially after it's been irradiated in the stores. But stop and think, how will I fertilize it? There's not going to be any running to a store if SHTF happens and buying some kind of organic fertilizer or anything like that. You have to realize in order to grow crops, to feed families and fertilize fruit trees and stuff like this, it takes a lot of fertilizer. And you go, but when you look at permaculture, there's no fertilizer. Yes, there are. Animals use the bathroom all the time. Stuff is constantly dying and falling. You have your carbons falling to the ground. You have nitrogens being put into the ground from rainstorms, stuff like this. All these things are happening in the wild, in the woods, to fertilize the woods. You have a buildup of mulch on the ground from leaves decaying and debris decaying and animal matter decaying from dead animals and animals using the bathroom and fruit falling off of trees decaying into the soil. All these nutrients are being put back into the soil, and it works. So that's why we're encouraging people here at Deep South Homestead to start permaculture now, because permaculture takes years to make happen. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in 1 year. It doesn't happen in 2, 3, 4. It takes up to 5 years on the average to make permaculture start working efficiently. So if SHTF happens, you're not going to jump out there and just start permaculture and make it work. So you've got to think about, can I till my land? Can I fertilize my land? If you can't do those two things right there, then you have a problem. You know, I mean, that's why I'm doing this. Y'all asked me this question. This is not something I'm just throwing out there. I'm just answering a question that's been thrown out there to us. How much is it going to cost me? Well, it's going to cost you a lot if you can't go to a store and you have no job. It's going to cost you 24 hours a day of time. Now, granted, you're going to have to sleep in that 24 hours. When I say 24 hours of time per day, you're going to put in about 16 to 18 hours a day, and then you're going to try to rest the rest of it. And you're going to pray that you can stay sustainable during this. And you're going to pray that you can have enough energy, because according to the surveys and the studies that I've looked at, they have determined that the average person would have to work over half the day to provide their own food, because everything would have to be done by hand. Unless you were one of the fortunate ones to happen to have a mule and all the plows to do the plowing with and stuff like that. But then again, that's going to take more land, because you've got that animal's got to have grass to feed on. You got to be able to raise enough grain to feed him during off seasons and stuff like that. So all of these factors play into this. That's why I told you I don't think, in my personal opinion, that there is any one definite answer in this particular question. How many people is in your household? And how much space do I have? Those are questions that you have to ask yourself. People with large families, you need to think about it, because you're going to need a pretty good sized piece of property. Husband and wives like Wanda and I, who the kids were empty nesters, the kids are gone. 2 acres, 2 to 3 acres. We've learned 3 acres works best for us because of the poor condition of the soil here, and as much sand as they are. Like I said, some of y'all in other parts of the country could do it with less, with richer soil. But what size family do you have? That's one of the questions you got to ask yourself, and how much space do I have? Because let's face it, Look at what you buy every week for your family. Now, let's just be real about this. Look at your groceries. Take into consideration how much you go out to eat. Where do you eat lunch at every day? Do you eat at home? Do you eat on the homestead? Or do you go out somewhere and eat? You eat at night? Do you eat out somewhere? Or do you eat at the homestead? If you do, what are you putting on the table? Every time you go grab a drink of something, think about that. If there's no electricity, do you have a way to get that drink of water? You're not going to be able to have tea. You're not going to be able to have Cokes. You're not going to get those things because they're just not going to exist. So think about that. Those are things that I have beat my head into the ground over the last week thinking about, trying to figure out an honest answer. And I looked at our situation here. Now, Wanda drinks coffee. All I drink in my life is water. Occasionally, maybe once a month when we go to town, I may pick up a bottle of Sprite, a small bottle, a 16 ounce, and it'll last me about 3 to 4 days. But now Wanda may drink coffee. She drinks coffee every day, and she drinks water, predominantly water other than her coffee, and she too will get a drink every so often when we go to town, or she may get an ice cream or something like that because she can still eat that kind of stuff. But if SHTF happens, we're not going to have those things. So do you have a way to get your water? So stop and think about how much space you have, how many people's in your household, what you spend on your groceries each week, what do you buy, vitamins, minerals, proteins, all these things that your fats, all these things that your body needs, all the things that you think that you buy each week. Factor all that in to your homestead. Can you produce that off of your homestead? Meat, all these things. Can you produce that on your homestead? And you come up with your own answer, because I'm giving you what the federal government says. Today, it has went from 2 acres down to 1 acre because we have more technology today. And we can do things smarter than we used to do them. And I personally believe it could be a little less than 1 acre. But I'm going to go with the norm, and I'm going to go with what the federal government says from the studies that these universities have said, based on calorie diets per day. The average diet consists of about 2,000 calories a day is what a person needs. Based on that diet with minerals, oils, fats, and sugars, it takes 1 acre per person. So, and it costs you about half a day's labor every day to produce that. So I hope this question has been answered for you from Deep South Homestead here, because y'all have thrown this out here to me for over a year now. And I finally just bit the bullet. I went ahead and done the research, and I've looked into it. And I hope that this doesn't upset you, because it's not really my opinion. It's the national opinion. I wanted to answer this question today on Porch Time because I felt like that I owed y'all an answer. You've asked me this question over and over and over and over, and I didn't want you to think I was putting you off. It's just that I really hadn't been wanting to answer it because I get so much flack and so many negative comments when I tell people how much of an area it takes to raise their food. And it's not intended to be hateful. It's not intended to be, to look down on anybody. It's just facts, y'all. I done the research. It's just facts. It's not Danny. Danny, I actually believe it can be done a little bit less than what the federal government says. But I just went with the national average of what they said based on the 2,000 calorie a day diet. And like I said, in the fats, the proteins, the sugars, the meats, all these kind of things that the body needs to be able to be sustainable, the water and all this. And they came up with 1 acre per person. That's not me. That's them. So I hope y'all have enjoyed Porch Time today, and maybe it's been a blessing to you, and maybe it's opened your eyes, because it definitely opened my eyes when I started looking into everything. And I've realized that at Deep South Homestead, even I have got to tighten up my belt because I'm falling behind in some areas, because it did open my eyes to my permaculture needs to be better than what it is. And I need to start really ramping up the nutrition in my soils and stuff like that in case something happens. As far as me having a way to get fertilizers and composts and stuff like this, I need to really, I need to do better in that area for my own personal self. And I hope that this has challenged you today to think also about what you need to do to make your situation better on your homestead. Thank you from Deep South Homestead.